Welcome to Vision to Value, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on how technology is planned, purchased, and implemented in state government health and human services agencies. Each episode explores the real challenges of transformation, from procurement pitfalls to leadership strategies, and provides bold insights to drive meaningful change. Your hosts, Carol Hussey and Tony Matthews, bring decades of experience from both public and private sector leadership. Together, Carol and Tony bring unfiltered insights and straight talk on what works, what doesn't, and how agencies and vendors can turn vision into real value. Now let's get started. Today, we are joined by Rachael Kerrick-Brucker, a national leader in health and human services innovation consulting. She has spent nearly 3 decades serving the child welfare industry and shifting traditional approaches to more engaging and collaborative processes. Whether policy and practice or innovation and technology, she believes the needs are the same because the common denominator is always about people. If we get that part right, we can pave the way to lasting outcomes and brighter futures.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Vision to Value, our podcast where we talk about the latest and greatest information, news, the landscape of health and human services, technology and service delivery. My co-host Tony is not with us today, as you can see, but we do have a very special guest with us, my friend Rachael Kerrick-Brucker. Rachael is a national consultant. She focuses primarily on innovation and implementation services. She's a former Illinois state government leader, and like myself, we've both worked in child welfare for many years. And so today we're going to be talking about CCWIS or not CCWIS, thinking about that path to modern child welfare systems and service delivery. And Rachael and I've known each other for many years. So you'll find this will be pretty casual conversation. We talk about these things all the time. So Rachael, why don't you give a proper introduction for yourself? Introduce yourself to our audience.
Thanks, Carol. Hi, everybody. I'm Rachael Kerrick-Brucker, and I am, as Carol said, a human services person. I was a caseworker for a long time and was in Illinois in leadership, various different things, and somehow ended up on a CCWIS project, and the rest is kind of history, and ended up doing some stuff on CCWIS there before I joined the private sector and was working in some technology, at a technology company, and now I'm just, consulting and helping states do what they got to do. So I'm truly a social worker. So I love helping people. It's weird that this innovation implementation stuff, even in a project I'm on now, I'll just mention that it's not human services, but I wanted to say that really so much of the work is the same in terms of what the staff need and, how we really want to have public sector be, engaging and accessible and, all the things. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, welcome. I'm super excited to have you here today. So today I mentioned, we're going to talk about CCWIS or not CCWIS. These projects are big and hairy and risky, and there's a lot of them that have been shut down, paused, pivoted, whatever you want to call it, because they're just not getting where they need to go, and for a variety of reasons. So we're not going to spend a ton of time, and we're certainly not intending to belittle anyone, any state. Everyone goes into these things with good intentions. But we are going to talk about today, also given the national climate, right? Like the administration that we have right now. Tony and I talk about these kind of things all the time, like putting out an APD request to the feds right now and asking for, 50, 60, $80 million is not likely to happen, and certainly not in quick order. So we want to talk today about how states might rethink their approach to CCWIS. So not as a system replacement only, but thinking about how you can align technology with practice, improving outcomes, driving value earlier, looking at sustainable approaches and things that can, return value along the way. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I would imagine if you're listening to this podcast, you probably already know what CWIS is, but just very, very briefly, right? We had SACWIS regulations for many, many years. And Rachel and I both worked in the SACWIS days. So we were there for that pain too. A lot of states complained about that, right? It was too prescriptive. It was, didn't match practice and all of that. And so the feds came out with CWIS regulations back in like 2016, offering a 50% match for solutions that were going to be compliant with their regulations, and really encouraging a modern, modular approach to architecture and design that actually did work for programs and practice. And so, there've been a lot of issues, right? There's high cost, misalignment with practice, lack of early value. We know that these systems, these projects, these CWIS projects tend to be on average 2 years late in being delivered. That's a lot. And if you think about it, that 2 years late, that also means many 2 years of money, 2 years of additional costs that you have to factor in as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the rigid like procurement processes and the challenges with implementation. And so, the one thing we'll start with too is you don't have to be CWIS compliant. You can still modernize your system and say, you know what, CWIS is not for me. We're not going to pursue that. There are a couple of states that have said that. They never submitted an intent to become CWIS compliant, and they're just gradually working on, modernizing their system. So I'll remind you of that. The funding for that's different. It doesn't mean all or nothing. You can still fund your system if you are not CWIS compliant, but it's done in a different way using FFP and other methods. So just put that out there. But Rachel, when we were kind of just talking about what we might chat about today briefly, you mentioned there's a real disconnect between practice and technology, and some of that might be because these systems are simply being replicated, built-in parity to whatever their SACWIS system did. But talk a little bit more, if you could, about that disconnect between practice and technology. What do you mean by that?
Well, first off, when you look at how some of these RFPs are put out there, just the language, and then further along on the project, when you even just look at like use cases and user stories, and it's so tech driven, and it may look like I'm a caseworker and I need da 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 da, but the work that we do is so rich, and it's so it's hard to embody that in a spreadsheet, sure, but it tends to be thought of as a tech thing versus an enhanced way of doing the work, and technology is the tool. And so, when you were saying earlier, these projects sometimes are delayed 2 years, and, we knew that it was going to be a huge undertaking because it's a lot, and child welfare is big, and it's an onion, and there's so much to the work that we do. And although there's similarities in practice across the country, there's, people have all their little nuances. And so then they want to make it more the way we do it here. So that, tends to be a difficulty in the roadmap and the timeline, the schedule. But when you think about just embracing, just starting out on a project, and you've got the whole kit and caboodle, and even let's say it's a perfect timeline and things are going really well, everybody's engaged, it's a lot to do. And things in the legislature and in the real world, things change in that 2-year period of time. So like when you're not necessarily getting things out as quickly as we had planned, not only are your downstream workers not getting any early value, and they're the ones out in the field doing the work, right? But then you're also constantly grasping at change that's coming at you. And then how do you, work that back into your project? And so that to me is like, if I was a director of an agency, or if I was, still doing this work on the state side, I would say, don't look at this as one big giant system. And isn't that kind of what some of the intent of CWIS was, for it to be modular? So if we were going to model that in how we did the practice piece, we would be looking at each piece of practice and starting, I don't want to say small, but starting in those pieces. So not starting what I call the front door intake, right? Seems like most states start at the hotline or the intake unit. And if you're behind several months or even a year or 18 months, whatever, those folks are generally contained. They're not out, they're not out in the field. That's an intake unit. So the ones that really need the technology aren't getting it right away.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to say we should reverse the roadmap, right? Like, I mean,
Yes.
because you often see the end of the roadmap are things like portals, mobile, and bidirectional interfaces. Those tend to be the last things that
Data.
states talk about. And it's like, wait a minute, shouldn't we like think about that in reverse for a variety of reasons, right? Like if we're modeling the behavior, and also I'll just say this too, and I know you agree with this because we've talked about it 100 times. Child welfare is not transactional and it's not linear. And so like this, when we talk about process flows and the front door being intake, yeah, I mean, I guess, but the real reality is if we want to talk about the beginning is with the family, or the beginning is, with a provider in a lot of ways. So if we start by getting our data house in order and maybe move into mobile or, something like that next, or, how can we implement things in chunks and
Yes.
fully understand. If there's a technical person or a systems integrator watching this, we are not minimizing the complexity of implementing things modularly. We get it. But I do think it can be done in certain areas, some not so much, but starting with data and really even just thinking about like the business model we want to affect rather than the one we have. Right. So that gets back to
Yeah.
your comments about modeling behavior. So if what I really want to empower my families to do some things for themselves, that also takes the heat off the caseworker a little bit if we decide,
1,000%. Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, back in the day before, I mean, I don't want to totally date myself, but people that know me know anyways. But I mean, I predate CCWIS, so there you go. We had child and family teams. And one of the things that, I used to do is I would have my clerical support. She did all this, like, she would type up my agenda and like send stuff out and like make sure she would actually kind of communicate with my clients just to make sure they got the notes and everything. And then I would like buy her a Yankee candle, like do something nice for her every month, because it was like, and then I would, we would do like delegating to the family members, like we would give them homework assignments. And it was, so like if you had a portal, you could totally model that stuff with technology. And yeah, it takes some of the onus off of the worker. And also it empowers the family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then they're part of building their own case plan. They're feeling motivated. Yeah. They're co-designing their plan with you. And so there just is this, and technology is so amazing, right? There's so many things we can do. And if we simply build the same thing that we had before on a modern platform, we're really missing that opportunity to enhance practice. And that was the original intent behind CWIS. Right. And so that's unfortunate because you're not maximizing the potential of the technology that you're purchasing.
Right. And I mean, maybe I'm Pollyanna, but I maintain that if you slow down and you chunk this stuff out, that it's doable and that we can truly impact practice. And I know that that's a loaded term to say enhance practice, and it can be flowery and all that good stuff, but that is the true intention. And it's about making the work truly manageable for the workforce. And it's about, I've said before in a blog or whatever, but this work is not meant to be efficient because it's complex. People didn't become social workers because they want to be efficient people. They want to be people. And so the technology, not only does it free up time to do other things, but it's to free up time so that you can augment those things, right? With more quality engagement and interaction, and really focus on the things that are going to help bring true change and sustainability to families.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and absent, that being the focus, we then end up in a situation where we get resistance, right? There's resistance from
Yeah,
staff, from the providers, and how are you going to, manage user adoption if you turn this thing on and they look at it and they're like, this actually made my job harder. Like there's more
yeah,
steps now, or I don't understand this interface. And, and Tony and I talk all the time about OCM. We won't talk a ton about that today, except for I'll just say it. You got to have OCM early, throughout, and after
yeah.
to
Hmm.
really, maximize that user adoption. But, I also think there's just a ton of, when you talk about, slow down and plan, I think there's a real opportunity there for for our program people and tech people to work together. I used to say like business should lead, but really it is a collaboration, because if I know that there's, a COTS product out there that can leverage the capabilities of my existing device,
Yeah,
and that gives me those features, right? Like you don't have to have somebody typing up your itinerary because it's on your phone already. You don't
right.
have somebody that has to help you figure out the logical order of your meetings for the day to maximize your drive time. The phone can do that for you, right? They can read out your notes to you on your way to your next appointment. So there's things that if I knew that that technology existed and I know what my job is, then I'm going to design a very different looking system than if all I know is the old system I had. So that collaboration between tech and business is so important. And also the willingness to change your practice a little bit, right? That's
Yeah,
something
yeah.
I think you think some states are a little, afraid
Hmm.
of that.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that, like the opportunity to enhance the practice based on the technology?
Hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, when I was a SACWIS person back in the day, the leadership that I worked with at the time, and I was this little caseworker that they pulled out of the field, so I'm around all these, like directors and deputy directors, and I heard multiple times from those people, this technology doesn't inform practice. Practice informs technology. So I, drank that Kool-Aid for a long time, and back then, I mean, maybe that was really truly more the case, but over time, and what I've learned from colleagues, doing this work for many, many years since, is that if you don't know what the capabilities are, then how can you truly think about your to be system, or your how you want your practice to be? I mean, you may have an idea of, we have to do this now, and I'd like to do it this way. But when you have that collaborative, relationship with your IT partners, um, that is to me, it's like a child and family team. It's like a parallel process. It's bringing those different cross sectors, or it's a multidisciplinary team. They're at the table, and it's a little harder to do that when you're working with, through the procurement process and having vendors come in after the fact. But if there's any way to model that, and I would say if you could do it, by functional area, or by practice area, then maybe you have a better opportunity to do that. Because when I worked, the SACWIS team, shout out to the SACWIS folks at Illinois, back in the day, it didn't happen overnight. But after SACWIS was implemented, and Illinois did not become a SACWIS compliant state, by the way, but after all those years, we built relationships, and I was a functional manager, and all the things, and we had field people come in every month, and we had a stakeholder group, and for that, it was release management, and it was, post implementation stuff. But the relationship is what really struck me, is that the IT guys and gals would come in, and they would hear firsthand, and we would laugh and joke, and sometimes they'd be like rolling their eyes or whatever, but it was truly a collaborative process. And I have tried to see how we could possibly do that again in a CWIS world, because I think part of what we're seeing happen with these projects that are going, off the side to the sidelines, whatever's happening with them, right? I also think that a big part of that is that collaborative process in the beginning, which part of that's OCM, but it's also, I'm going to channel my Brene Brown, but it's like the authenticity piece. I say to folks I work with, you didn't become a human services person or a public sector, whatever you are, to learn. It's not your job to know what an enterprise service bus is. I didn't know what that was. I just started writing stuff down and Googling it and, putting it on a spreadsheet. And it's okay. Like, I think that's, people feel like ignorant of things, like they feel out of their realm, and they are. That's fine. You should be. That's not your discipline. And then on the IT side, sometimes, not always, I'm not trying to broad brush, but sometimes it's like, oh no, like they want to make your process so much simpler. And we need that, certainly, but it's not as black and white as that, right? So that's why having those conversations, and really, I've heard so many times like, well, you're getting into the weeds. This work is in the weeds. That's the thing.
It is indeed. Yeah. And I think that collaboration that you're talking about is where that opportunity exists. And so if you don't
Yes.
have those conversations, you're not really going to innovate. And so what you're building then is what we've always had, which is a system that documents your practice versus supporting and enabling it.
Yes.
Right? Like our workers, these frontline folks who are out there doing this hard work every single day, like what they're documenting is compliance stuff, reporting stuff, claiming, eligibility, but what they really need are tools to help them do their job better.
Yeah.
And most aqua systems don't have that, but the modern technology could help them in
Sure.
so many ways if we were better about baking in some time up front for a bit more of that visioning and BPR instead of just running right out to buy a product and bring an SI in, right? Like there's some, and it doesn't have to take a year or 2 years. And I'm not talking about feasibility studies because that's not going to do what I'm talking about here. But real visioning about the experience you want your workers to have, what you want your providers to have, and what you want your family and older youth to have, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I would also add to that too. And I like that you said it's not a feasibility study, because that has a purpose. And those are, can be very good tools to your plan. But I think, and I don't want to speak for you, and you can correct me if I'm not thinking about this the right way, but what I'm hearing and what's in my gut about this is that it's people that are like not afraid to tell you that's a crazy idea, or, like we've done the work and we've lived some of these pain points, but it does require people that know this work. And honestly, kind of both sides of it. Like, I'm not a tech person. I will always say, like, I'm more of a functional, like, I just want you to think about how we could do the work differently. I don't know how to code. I don't know how to do, that's not me. I put enterprise service bus on a spreadsheet so I can look that stuff up. But you need somebody that can come and get in the weeds and sit down and look at your program plans with you and talk through things like core practice areas where, that's the other thing. Like, you don't kind of see that here comes a cat. You don't kind of see that level of collaboration on a CWIS project. Like, the people that come into these projects, the resources that are brought in have a certain lane, right? And so it would be really hard for me to stay in any kind of a lane that's like, let me see your plan. Like, what are you doing? Like I say all the time, when I go to support a state or a program, the first thing I do is look at their website. I look at their mission statement. I look at like what their strategic goals are. I look at their CFSRs, their child and family service reviews. And I can tell you probably on one hand, the times I've actually seen that language reflected in their RFP for CWIS.
Yeah.
Right.
Agree. Yeah. They're almost all tech driven, functional, like feature driven, really.
Yes.
Well, and so this leads into our conversation about like modeling and simulating, You had a really great experience in your previous life working with a sim lab that I think has informed your thinking around this a lot. And
Yes.
you can model processes and test processes and lay them out before you implement the tech, but there's also ways to sort of bring it together. Like, can you share a little bit about your
Yeah,
ideas around modeling and simulation and how that relates to tech?
I sure can. So it's super exciting. I'll geek out about it a little bit. Well, so first of all, again, it's an area where it's a way to do enhanced practice, right, with the technology, but it really um, lends itself to, like I said, chunking this stuff out into practice areas because it would be really difficult to do it like with this big linear project timeline. But I'll pick something like assessment, right? Because there's multiple workers that touch the assessment process for families. And so using a sim lab and an evidence-based model for decision making, like how you gather the information, it looks at bias and it looks at like your hypothesis, like is this what you think is happening or is this what is the evidence that this is happening? Like, when you document stuff and then you talk to your supervisor, um, hopefully that supervision, that's a quality piece of the practice. And so this gives you the ability to not only have the workers practice their skills at engaging the family, gathering information, completing an assessment, but also discussing that with, either a mentor, like a mentor peer or a supervisory staff. And then that information kind of overlays, how we have like decision trees or AI and some of those assessment tools out there will kind of, I say, spit out a safety finding or a risk finding. But that information is only as good as that finding, that outcome is based on what you tell it, right?
Yeah.
So if you're not gathering that information on the front end, and this is a gut job for sure, but we've all been in situations, if we've been in the field, that you're like, oh, I that could have had a different outcome. And thank God, I've never had that happen to me personally, but I've had colleagues that they've had some pretty bad outcome cases. And so that's when we talk about the field not getting the value soon enough, like I'm doing my hand stuff here, those are the kind of things they need now. They need that stuff like yesterday. They need that stuff like 20 years ago. So when you have the ability to practice and get that feedback, a sim lab, um, they generally, these programs work so that you can stop in the moment and they can get that feedback right there. So and there's multiple ways to do it. And we're working on a way to do this in the sector I'm working in right now, and it's funny to me how transferable that is, even
Yeah.
outside of a human services sector. It's just such a valuable thing.
Yeah. And even in human services, the social workers are accustomed to that style of learning. And so rather than,
That's right.
showing them the drop downs and the buttons and the screens, having them use it in the course of
Yes.
doing their jobs is so much more impactful. And it can inform your product roadmap because you might try this thing out and realize maybe you missed a step, or maybe this thing isn't quite working like you like it to. And perhaps to change. But I will also throw a kudos out there. Not that this is not an endorsement or an advertisement, but there's a company called Listen, Lyssn. They have the coolest tool. Getting back to your evidence-based practice
Mhm.
comment, that provides that feedback in the moment.
Wow.
And to like caseworkers in the field or when they're doing motivational interviewing, things like that. Like it is like AI magic for evidence
Mhm.
based stuff. And so there are tools out there that already can do this. The other thing I'll say about sort of simulation modeling, back to our comments about data, because I know you get really excited about data too. Data, if you think about where your data originates and you start to simulate the flow of the data, boy, that changes your product roadmap
Yeah,
too, doesn't it?
it
Right?
sure
Like about
does.
where things originate. We don't want caseworkers putting in data to create a report. The data should be captured at the place that it naturally occurs in the life cycle of a case. That builds the report. People shouldn't be creating your
No,
reports,
no.
right?
Exactly. When you look at like the federal reports that we have to do, like your AFCARs and your NCANs and stuff, I don't know if they still do NCANs, it's been a minute, but you should, I mean, outside of those requirements, that stuff can be mapped from all your natural processes, right? From that, I call it that knock on the door. Like you should be able to talk to text notes and it should suck that into an AFCARS report. And
Yeah.
that should be like somebody else's responsibility. That should just magically happen in the technology. But the types of capabilities that are out there, like, gosh, for data, right? So it makes me think about, well, first of all, for data has not, at least in my lifetime, and I'm going to shout out to Susan Smith. I learned so much from her when Susan was at Casey Family Programs. Oh my gosh.
Brilliant.
Like,
Yeah.
I just wanted to, yeah, that was one of my times I was able to step out of the IT division for a while and go back into the child welfare, foster care adoption until they pull me back for CWIS. But we did a lot of work with Casey Family Programs, and we had a lot of work around data and our, what our measures were. And I learned myself so much about, you just send these reports to the feds every September, and there's really no real good lead measures to see, okay, well, we've had these many kids that have moved in care, or we've had these many kids age out, or we've had these, age out without a good permanency option. We've had this many kids come back in less than 24 months. But how does the program change before that report comes out? That's the kind of information we need. And so we've done this disservice to the workforce because, first of all, we made data a dirty word. We made it like this punitive compliance, like, I'll never forget, I had a caseworker when I was doing when we were doing the CCWIS feasibility study. We were interviewing caseworkers about, I won't say what part of the state, so then you can't guess, but we're interviewing caseworkers about how they use data. And this was the comment: what? That's not, we don't use data. Like, that is for our supervisors and managers to tell us what we're doing wrong. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you are the data people. You generate it when you knock on the door. So we have not done, and if there's a state out there doing this, raise your hand. I want to come and meet you, because we don't do a good job of talking about it with our workforce. We don't talk about it like, no, this is your thing, guys, by the way, and make it consumable for them. So when we talk about dashboards and stuff on these projects, I see it often, maybe for the supervisor level, managers, and on up. But I'm like, what about the workers?
Yeah.
What about the workers? Like, if you can show them how, oh, look, all my older youth that don't have, that don't have a visiting resource, like maybe they don't have a return home goal, but they have, those kids that have that resource, I'm trying to say, those kids actually, don't age out without supports. Oh, like if you can actually see that happen on your own caseload, or my kids that are stable. I mean, we know that anecdotally, we know that in practice, but the data should speak to the people doing the work.
Yeah.
Not just compliance. Anyways, sorry, I get crazy about that.
Yeah. And there's so many capabilities technologically to support that, right?
Yes.
Like, we should have dashboards that allow us to look at the priorities and have that, organized for us in such a way that it prioritizes our work or helps us think about how we're going to plan for these cases in a different way. And, I think that's the key here, is what we're trying to get at is, whether you go CWIS or not CWIS, certainly, I get why states want to be CWIS compliant. They want the 50% match, right? I get it. But that comes with a lot of strings. And, we've
Sure
seen
does.
that it may or may not work for you, and it may or may or not bring you value. So we're trying to talk today about, like, whether you CWIS or not, how you might do things differently to affect real change in your organization incrementally, not having to wait 5, 6 or more years to get anything that actually helps your workers. every state that I talk to continues to have vacancy issues. They continue to have,
Yes.
hiring, recruitment and retention. So, and we continue to have outcomes problems, right? So how can we use these technologies to sort of rethink delivering early value? So what do you think, in your opinion, and I'll certainly pile on when you're done, but like, what should states be doing to sort of rethink that CWIS journey a little differently?
I would do CWIS Light. If CWIS is a must for you for all the reasons we understand, then I would do CWIS Light. I would not put an RFP out for an entire ginormous system. I wouldn't. If I was director so and so today, I would put it out for assessments and notes, and I would really focus on that engagement stuff from in the handoff from child protection to caseworkers. I would start there.
Mm-hmm.
Unless my hotline system was like falling down, I wouldn't start there. I would start where that that work happens, right? And go mobile. Uh, have those workers, those disciplines working together, not like baton passing, but like, because then if you can model that in like what I call like learning circles or a proving ground, if you can build that into your training plan, and your onboarding, if you are lucky, if you're able to do that, then you get that feedback right there, and those folks then naturally become your champions because
Yeah.
they're seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly of these projects, right? It's not like they're just getting these flowery communications and like, oh yeah, here we go. This is going to be a wonderful thing. So I would just start there. I would truly start with the meat and potatoes, I say. That is
Yeah.
assessments, notes, and get engagement.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I'm a big fan of mobile first, and because it's a quick win. Like, and this is for real, folks. I have seen native mobile solutions implemented in states statewide within 6 months. You
Yep.
will immediately improve the life of your caseworkers. You will immediately improve the quality and timeliness of your data. And then you can kind of work on the back end stuff a little slower, right? Get something in the hands of your workers as soon as possible and affect change there. Because the other thing you get from that is trust and buy in.
Yes.
And, you're building that credibility that we care about the pain that you're feeling out there. And there are other products I've seen too where that improve you talk about engagement, that improve communication, like with foster families or
Yes.
between foster families and caseworkers or foster families and bio families. There's a whole lot of communication and stuff that happens there that today requires somebody to tell the caseworker types it into the system. Like it's just crazy. It doesn't have to be that way.
Hmm.
And we don't have to
Yeah.
wait 5 years to then get a mobile in version 2 or 3 or whatever of your CWIS journey. Do that first, clean up your data first. There are other COTS products on the market that do kind of point solution things. I'm
Hmm.
not saying that your roadmap should be all COTS point products, because I know that integration is a challenge there, but you could still have a CRM for some of your modules and then use like your mobile, or maybe there's a licensing product out
Hmm.
there, or even your ERP. Like, it's kind of silly that we're asking systems integrators to build out financial modules when there are often the states have their own ERP system anyway.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why aren't we, just tying into that when that's what they're built for? Like, you got to remember, when you bring a systems integrator in, and this is no knock against my systems integrator friends, I love you all. Um,
I love you
you're,
too.
you're paying the systems integrator for hours. And so if I were to say, let's use licensing as an example, this is a great example. If I said to, in my RFP, remember, they're giving you what you asked for. So if in
Hmm.
my RFP, I say, I would like you to build me a licensing system, a licensing module as part of this roadmap. And it takes your systems integrator 6, 8 months, whatever, to build just that module. There is no way, I don't care how great they are, that they're going to build something that's as robust as some of the COTS solutions that are on the market that were purpose built to perform that function for child welfare.
Right.
And I would also say in those cases, in some states, your counties might already be using those things and they might love them. And so there's a carrot, folks. This is tip number one. You want to make your counties happy in a county administered state? If 3/4 of your counties are using a product they love, just let them keep using it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, why do you want to and then deliver something inferior, right? Like, just give them a carrot once in a while, the more you dictate that they have to use your single system that may not meet their needs, the more workarounds, the more different systems, the more frustration. So pick and choose what you're going to build and what you're going to buy very, very carefully, because there are some opportunities to just leverage something that's already out there.
Yep. And full disclosure, I was somebody back some time ago that wouldn't have said mobile first. I mean, I like to have everything in its own package, and so I was like, but I have since then seen that it's a lot to chew. It's a lot to bite. It's a lot to bite off. It's a lot to chew. And, doing this mobile, there's just so much out there. Why would you recreate it?
Yeah.
Truly.
Well, and some people are like, well, I don't want to do multiple procurements. Well, you could go to Carasoft and buy mobile solutions or a licensing product or whatever and get that in and implement it quickly. You don't have to go out for a full-blown big 2-year RFP endeavor for everything. You have a lot of different procurement channels available to you. Hopefully you have a great relationship with your procurement officer and they can help you navigate that. But, buying a $1 or $2 million solution that's going to give you major, major return on your investment is different than putting out a $50 million RFP.
Yeah.
Right.
And
so
having it get canceled. That you got to go back and ask for that money again.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a tough conversation.
It is. But definitely work with your procurement people, evaluate all the different ways in which you might go get your mobile or whatever the other things are, get your data house in order. Like if I were year one, that's the two things I would focus on, data and mobile. And then like it's just designing your roadmap in such a way that it kind of, you can design your procurement that way also, right? And you can still do one APD.
Yeah. And, we didn't say this unless I missed it, but from the data thing again, that also, if you focus on data first, that does, now I said it's good to get in the weeds, but now I'm going to say it's not. So when we do the process improvement stuff and we look at like what are gathering requirements, looking at the data requirements and how we use data, who uses data, who captures it, where it's stored now, and who gets it, all that actually helps inform what you need and don't necessarily need in your process going forward. So that's a good place to start with that too.
Yeah, it helps design your data model for your future system because I don't care what state you've worked in. I've worked in many. And the CCWIS databases are all a mess. I mean, because they're 30 years old, right? Yeah. And so like the data that you needed 30 years ago, you may or may not need now. We have different ways of designing, data models and stuff. So definitely start early on the data. It is not just about conversion. And set up your data governance structure, like a legitimate data governance structure that brings together tech and business folks.
Because you really do on these big projects run the risk of when you have downstream those co-supplier divisions that like they maybe touch a case, but they're not the caseworker, you're like your other divisions, right? Depending on who's, running the project at that point, and, maybe it's even a different vendor, who knows, but they may be capturing some of the same data that you're capturing way back here. And those were some of the problems we had in CCWIS days. And I can remember being in that seat where you'd get the inspector general's officer call or a media would call, and it would be something that was on the front page of the paper. And you'd be like, well, this system says this and this system says this, which is it? Like, we shouldn't be spending $50 million to recreate that problem.
Right. That's right. Yeah. 100%. 100%. Well, Rachel, one thing you said, and we'll kind of, I'll ask you for some closing thoughts, but you said that to me previously that your recommendation is that states should make practice innovation the North Star, not just system modernization. So I'll share that, but do you want to give our listeners some closing thoughts on CWIS modernization and how to move forward?
Well, yeah, I would say start with your strategic plan, your goals, your CFSR. Start there. Pull that out, look at it, look at what your core practices are. And whenever you're looking at writing an RFP, just from the very get-go, it should start with that. And your messaging to the workforce should be about that. Your OCM should be that should be your foundation of the OCM piece. And that tells the workforce too that this work is important and we're not changing it just to change it. And we're actually bringing a tool or tools in to make, to really foster this good work, right? So I would start there. And then again, I can't say enough, I would really think about going practice area by practice area or module to whatever. But
Yeah.
assessment is, an obvious place to start for me. And to marry that practice piece to your training plan. So when you're training on a new technology, you're not getting the click and point training. Like that can be done in video snippets, that can be hosted in your CRM. We're doing that on a project that I'm on right now. And those are just little things like, people can go and refresh themselves on that. But the best way to do it is, okay, we're going to be bringing this piece of functionality out, or we're going to bring this whole entire, mobile out. Have them learn that with their actual work, have them, in your UAT environment, even you can have truer use cases so that by the time they're onboarded, it's been through several levels of staff buy-in already, because you're giving them that time to do the feedback.
Yeah. No, love that. All great. Yeah, I mean, I think that Rachel, we might be the two biggest, or have been the two biggest CWIS cheerleaders on the planet in early years, and not to say that I'm not anymore. But what I care a lot about is the value that technology can potentially bring to child welfare programs, and I haven't been seeing that, and so that really drives me, and that's why I was so excited about our conversation today. And I hope that our viewers will, get some golden nuggets from this conversation. And I would encourage you, if we talked about things today that you might be interested in, please do reach out. Rachel and I talk to everybody all the time. Like, we're always willing to help a state to kind of think through things. So please do reach out. And Rachel, I'm going to give you just a shout out too. You have a blog coming out in a couple of weeks. So please follow Rachel on LinkedIn. She's always putting great content out there, and be looking for that upcoming blog. I'm sure there's going to be some great tangible advice in that for you as well. And then if you are loving what you're hearing on Vision to Value, subscribe to our podcast on YouTube so that you get notifications every time we drop a new episode. But Rachel, I had so much fun today, and I'm so glad that you come in and fill in for Tony and bring a new face to our podcast. We're really happy about that. So thank you very much for attending today.
Thanks for having me, Carol.
Yeah,
It was fun. Yeah.
We'll see you all next time on Vision to Value.